All right, so in this example, we'll take a look at creating our own custom variables that we can use to assign different weight values to questions. Now, we're not going to work within Storyline's built-in quizzing. We're actually going to create all this on our own. And the benefit to doing this is that we can actually work with negative point values if we're creating our own variables. So it's a little bit more work, but we certainly get some benefit by doing that. So what am I starting with here? Well, let's just say we're going to have a 3-question scenario around 3 different types of leadership competencies: communication, coaching, and listening. And we want to give different weight values based on the choice that the learner makes, including some negative choices. Now, all we're starting with right here is a couple radio buttons that I inserted, right, just from the Insert tab and then Button. And then I would maybe add Choice 4 if I wanted one more, but that's really it. And then we also created 3 variables over here in the project variables, and one for each of the questions. Now, if I had obviously a lot of questions, I would certainly create more, but in this case, 3 questions is fine. And I do need to create one more, right? I need a way to combine all those variables that I just created. So we'll create this and we'll call this one total, right? This is my total score. So total score equals coaching plus communication plus listening scores. And it is also a number. And I'll click OK. So the same process I just did for total is what I did for those other 3 variables. All right, so how do we evaluate this? How can we add these up? Right now we have the variables, we have the choices, but we need a way for each of these choices then to kind of assign that variable weight. So we can do that from the triggers panel. A lot of different ways to do it. One way to do it is to adjust a variable, and we'll just evaluate which of these buttons is selected. So from our trigger action, we want to adjust variable. In this case, it's communication, and I know that because I'm on my communication question. Operator equals assignment. Value equals, well, let's just do the first one. That's 3 points. And when the user clicks or when state changes, right? When user clicks, button 1. And as soon as I click it, that's going to make this button selected, okay? Now, I've already had that set up. I can then come over here and click Control-C, Control-V to paste it in place, but then I do need to make a change, right? I need to make this next value -10, and not when I click button 1, but when I click button 2, choice 2. Double click it again, adjust variable, this time -5 when I click choice 3. All right, so there is my first set of variables that are being evaluated. Let's do one more thing here just so we can keep an eye on this to make sure that we're doing it right. We're going to insert a reference to this first communications. So the easiest way to do that is to click Control key just to bring up a text box. And then with that active text box, I'll go to Insert, Reference, and then I'm going to pull in that first question variable that we're working with, communication, click OK. And you see that little formatting right there just shows the % sign and the variable name. That's just going to show us what this variable is. So let's preview the project. Now it should work that every time I click a button, I should see this value change. 3, -10, and 5. All right, so we know that it's working. So essentially this is now set up. I'm just going to insert a button to go to the next slide. So I'll just say continue. And then with this button, let's say jump to next slide. Now, all I'm going to do now, just to keep this moving, and next slide is okay, is duplicate this one. So Control D to make a copy of it. And then I'll call this one Q2, and I'll call it coaching. And let's just leave the same values right here, but I do need to update my choices right here, right? I need to come into button 1, and not communication this time, but coaching. And it's still going to be the button 1. Come into this one and change it. So since if I follow the same process, then I can just go ahead and add it for each of these. I'll change that to coaching. All right. And then I would also change this one to the coaching variable reference. So one more time, I'll duplicate it and then I'll add up those values. And I just went ahead and paused it, then added it for listening. So I really have 3 questions right here that each evaluate the variables. In the next lesson, we'll go ahead and actually just create this final slide where we put in references to each of the variables and then we add up the total scores for all of them.